Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Director of Artist and Studio Programs here at Baltimore Clayworks, and we are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining from my office located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Katherine Von Cooper. Katherine is a ceramic artist living and working in Baltimore, Maryland, and received her BFA in ceramics at the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2025. She was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and draws inspiration from the state's tradition of folk pottery. Pond Cooper works primarily in functional pottery, using wheel-thrown forms and atmospheric firing to explore her mixed racial identity and the impermanence of human connection. Her work combines Chinese visual motifs with American folk pottery processes, translating her personal Chinese American and Laotian experience into clay. For more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org and tune in for our next artist talk on Tuesday, December 16th with Shalaya Marsh from 12:30 to 1:30. And I will now turn it over to Kat.
Hi, thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction. Um, my name is Katherine Von Cooper. I am the current Embark Fellow at Baltimore Clayworks. I graduated from MICA this past May with a BFA in ceramics and minors in drawing and art history. So this is me in the studio. Thank you, Kayla, for this wonderful photo. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I graduated from high school in 2020. I know. But I really love the South. I love being from there. It makes up a very big part of who I am and definitely made me very comfortable talking about race and standing up for my beliefs. I'm a mixed Chinese American woman. I'm half Chinese, half white. And right now I'm focusing my work on cultural loss through assimilation, dehumanization, and fetishization of mixed race people, and the resentment that accumulates over a lifetime of being actively othered. And then this is me and my big sister when we were little babies, and these are tomatoes and peaches from my mom's garden. I'm gonna go over briefly just like my foundations in clay and what were the strongest building blocks and when I decided to fully pursue ceramics. Those things were the ceramics program at MICA, Baltimore Clayworks actually, and the Penland School of Craft. I'm gonna start with Baltimore Clayworks. That's me in 2022. I was a summer intern for Matt. I learned how to mix glaze, use a triple beam balance. I got to fire to cone 10 for the first time, and I am now a very happy cone 10 reduction atmosphere potter. But that's me probably my third time ever in the Baltimore Clayworks studio. That respirator was way too big for my face, but it's okay. And then this is the first piece I ever fired at the studio. I got to take one of Matt Heilig's wheel throwing classes as part of that internship. And the first thing I made was a mug with a big ol' schnoz on it. Everyone was always so, all the artists and the residents and people taking classes were always so wonderful and welcoming to me here, so I kept coming back in the summers to shadow or to teach summer camps and just maintaining that connection to clay when I wasn't in school and didn't have studio access. That school was really, really important to me. I was fortunate enough to attend a couple of summer workshops at the Penland School of Craft in Western North Carolina on work study and then as a studio assistant. So growing up in North Carolina, I had pretty much no concept of the rest of the state besides Charlotte and the Triangle. So the only part of Western NC I had been to was Asheville, but you know. And so when I went to Penland for the first time, it felt like I'd fallen down the rabbit hole into Wonderland because, what do you mean? This beautiful, magical place was here in my home state the whole time, and I had no idea. It was right under my nose, which I mean 130-ish miles northwest from Charlotte. But it was such a miraculous experience to me because I was, for the first time in my life, fully surrounded by craftspeople who shared the same love and commitment to craft. And there was this mutual understanding of why we were all here in this beautiful environment. And then I started scraping, the surface of North Carolina's craft history, and a lot of the particularly ceramic history in the state. And I started feeling some connecting threads to the folk craft, the Mingei history. And then once back at school, I turned my attention to researching the Mingei movement and how I culturally relate to it, which I will come back to. But these are my wonderful friends. This was the 3D studio assistants at Penland. We saw a lot of cool bugs, made a silly orange with a face, and then I was also painting while I was there. And then mica ceramics, the longest and most influential to me, because I can't imagine my life without mica ceramics. I had originally planned to minor in ceramics and major in illustration when I first started, but the instant I took a wheel throwing class, I changed my mind and declared my major as ceramics. I had done some hand building in high school, but wheel throwing is what really sold me on it, and I just fell so fervently in love with clay once I was on the wheel. And my interest in functional pottery came really naturally. Something I didn't have to think about why I liked it. It just clicked as something I felt like I needed to do. And it just compelled me to keep going because of, the intense process and the rich art history behind it. And then Rebecca Chappell was my professor for all the wheel classes. This is her on the left at our Empty Bowls sale that our class did, but she was really wonderful. I'm so grateful for her instruction and guidance over the years. But this is my senior studio. This is me at my solo show last fall, which will go straight into my body of work. Junior year is when I started to really click. Things started to click, and I found a voice to start conceptualizing within my work. So Circle and Circle Compulsion is a set of 70 wheel thrown plates that form the 70 frames of a 7-second, 10 frames per second animated loop of my hands throwing one of these plates. The GIF is a little laggy, but it's the file size on the PowerPoint. So I rotoscoped footage of myself throwing one of these plates on Procreate. Then I printed out those frames just on copy paper and then traced onto leather hard clay and then scratched and did the actual drawing with a needle tool. And then at bisque, I inlaid red iron oxide. These were salt fired in 4 batches in a small temperamental salt kiln on Micah campus. But it was so much fun, and the whole thing felt really lucky and special to me because I could just fall into this routine of making and process, and it was just very comfortable, and I didn't have to think about it too much. And the whole time it just felt like breathing because everything was so circular, and I would be carving plates while I was actively firing one of the kilns. I would just bring them outside with me. And it also felt really lucky because I threw, trimmed, and fired exactly 70 plates and didn't have any catastrophic losses. So I had 70 from the start to the end. And then here it is installed. I hung it in a single line around a smaller gallery room. I was thinking about zoetropes and circumambulation, just as a way to experience the work. But this whole show, this whole project was really just a love letter to wheel throwing and to muscle memory and just a declaration of affection for my medium and this process. And then these are my favorite 2 plates because I got really blushy flashing on them and they make me very happy. My undergraduate thesis show is called Regular Reminders. It was really just all about my family. I'm especially drawn to fired ceramic for the permanence of the medium because fired ceramic can become an archive for memory and is so will stand the test of time, and memory is so much more vulnerable to loss over time. So this archive of love and grief I keep in functional forms, allowing me the intimacy of interaction with them on a daily basis and with these memories. I got to install my senior show in this beautiful wood room on Micah campus that's used for like meetings and artist talks, and relevant to my thesis is used for like funeral services. The centerpiece of this show is called Cart Service. It was a set of wheel-thrown porcelain like dim sum steamers. They're not functional as steamers. Porcelain's just not a great material for that, but they do stack and unstack. And then the place settings for like you would find in a dim sum restaurant. It's the dim sum table to me is this place of gathering, of storytelling, of history, and I made this piece to instill each of those multiples of family meals into a singular moment outside of time. Then here's some detail shots. You can see closer how they stack, and the holes in the glazing are referencing the holes in the steamer, the metal steamers. And then this is a risograph printed order ticket. And then the carpet is lined with jasmine tea leaves as wheel tracks, like from the carts. And all this next work is going to be in my thesis as well. Set of 6 tones is 6 porcelain bells that were glazed with joss paper and incense ash and salt from tears I produced during a viewing of the Joy Luck Club. Burning joss paper is a Chinese funerary practice. You send like money basically to your ancestors in the afterlife. I think it's kind of funny because the joss paper on the right, they're labeled like hell banknotes. But I collected this ash and then I glazed these with them. The 6 bells stand in for the 6 tones in Cantonese, the language my family lost through assimilation. And they rest on a bed of woven joss paper strips. And this one at the end has an ink drawing of a swan feather, inspired by this passage at the beginning of the Joy Luck Club novel by Amy Tan. And the particular quote is, now the woman was old, and she had a daughter who grew up speaking only English and swallowing more Coca-Cola than sorrow. For a long time now, the woman had wanted to give her daughter the single swan feather and tell her, this feather may look worthless, but it comes from afar and carries with it all my good intentions. And she waited year after year for the day she could tell her daughter this in perfect American English. And I do think language is definitely one of the largest losses I feel in my identity, in my mixedness, in my Americanness. So that is where that came from. Then while we're talking about the Joy Luck Club, I've been making these little face rice bowls for like a year and a half now. It's based on this silly saying that for every grain of rice you don't eat, each grain of rice is a pockmark on the face of your future spouse to get kids to finish their food, to scare them your husband's going to be ugly if you don't finish your food, which I think is really silly. But it's delightful, and this is the quote from the book. What I found really interesting when I read the book actually is that this story comes from the perspective of a daughter who is actually Weijin, who's half Chinese and half white, which was a detail omitted in the movie adaptation. But I found it really interesting that this was a story that I had attached to so strongly, and then later found out that the character was also mixed like me. But I throw these on the wheel and then I shape them by hand when they're still quite wet. And then once they're dry enough, I press rice grains into their faces. I have a little Ziploc in my studio labeled "Studio Rice Do Not Eat." And I use them over and over until they fall apart. But I've made a few iterations of these. I'm going to keep making them. They make me really happy. And then also the spotty reduction on this celadon in the middle makes me really happy because it kind of makes this bowl biracial. Then Eulogy for Luthier is a tribute to my paternal grandfather, who was an extremely skillful musician, and music became just this wonderful thing for my family to share and has been really instrumental in me processing grief. As like an actual object, this piece still confuses me. It's kind of not much of a thing, but it allowed me to process the loss, and this pattern, this design is still showing up in my work now. It's modeled after one of the, I think, 22 mountain dulcimers that my grandpa built, and then here it is resting on an absent lap where it would sit when played. The other component to this piece is an audio composition compiled of recordings of my grandparents' music together, and then I added myself in singing with them after my grandfather had died. But I didn't want to figure out how to put an audio file in a PowerPoint, but it is on my website. And then lastly, I made a series of stone lithographs depicting kiln gods made by some of my dearest friends. A kiln god, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like a declaration of goodwill that watches over your pots or whatever pieces are in the kiln to make sure they survive. It's a form of protection in the same way a friendship bracelet works. But I made frames for each of them, and I really wanted to celebrate these sweet little things because they're really special, and I wanted to give them their own little portrait. This one is a plate and stone lithograph, so it's printed in 2 layers, and then this is just like a process shot of drawing on the limestone, and I was drawing from life. And it was also really special because this one on the left here, the kiln god made by this person, my friend Evelyn, she was also helping to teach me lithography, so that was a really wonderful exchange. And then here is my sister with her little mouse she made me, and then that's about half of the edition of mouse prints. But they're just really special objects, and I wanted to like honor them as this thing that exists in the clay world. And then I graduated. So I was really lucky to be just provided the opportunity to go to Watershed pretty much right like a month after I graduated. It was the perfect amount of time to like get over burnout, and then go be in beautiful coastal Maine. So I was there for this summer session 1 called Remixed. It was for all mixed race artists, so our cohort was this just like wonderful biracial safe haven in like beautiful Maine, and there were no external expectations or pressures about race or how to act, and no feelings of otherness, and it was the most I had ever like genuinely felt like I belonged to a group. So this is that's our hot dog brick right there in the middle. We had a couple lovely campfires, and there's the barn when I came up the hill at like 4 a.m. It was just so beautiful. This is my studio setup. Here's some paintings I did while I was there. And then like these people became my family so quickly. Like in just a few days, we were all like celebrating together, we were hanging out together, we were just spending all this time. And so to really like lock these people in as my family, I organized dumpling lunch. So I went out and got us like ingredients, and we all came to the Commons for lunch and made dumplings together, and the wonderful kitchen staff cooked them for us. And I've also never seen such a large quantity of dumplings be made so quickly, but it makes sense because we're all ceramicists. But I felt really lucky to share this with them because making dumplings was something I started doing in college, and then I brought to share with my own family, and so it just feels like this very familial thing to do. And you know, how wonderful is it to love and be loved by these people I had met like 10 days before. And we still keep in touch. This is my cohort. I love them so much. They're my second family. And we all still hang out and see each other sometimes. And then the work that came out of Watershed with me, it'll load in. Being in such a safe zone of mixedness gave me the time and space to confront the like anger and resentment that I had gathered over the years, and just to be really frank about the weird things people say to me when they find out I'm mixed, and confront just like blatant fetishization I've dealt with. I remember very particularly a friend's parent, upon the discovery that my parents are white and Chinese, said to me like, "That's such a beautiful mix," and I was like, "You're talking to me like I'm a dog." And that sort of just kept going. And I'd been, that comment kept sort of coming up from like teachers, from classmates, from teammates. And just the way people talk about children of miscegenation is really dehumanizing and objectifying and very appearance based. And also, my family dog is also a mutt, and he's very happy and healthy, and I love him. And then here that running pattern is again on a plate. And it being on a plate, like growing up Chinese, every now and then I would get called dog eater to my face. So using the symbol does feel sort of loaded, but it also feels like I'm, reclaiming these insults and addressing this racism a little more bluntly without it being super personal. And then just again, like I said earlier, that animating my pottery feels like breathing life into it. And it really does. And I feel like it really helps deliver my message. And here especially, I want to use movement and this breath of life in this like blue and white Chinese porcelain aesthetic and pattern to reject stereotypes of like passivity and weakness in East Asian women particularly. And I'm sticking with this line of thought while I'm planning and making for my time here at Clayworks. And now I'm back at Clayworks. So this is from a lovely handle demo from Matt a couple months ago. And then here's what I've been working on the studio. This fall, I've been focusing on just improving my pottery and really focusing on the function and form before I go a little more conceptual in the spring. I've made some mugs. I made the urn for my grandfather when we interred him this fall. And then those marks of music, like from the dulcimer before, are showing up in my pots now. And I'm sure some stained glass patterns are sure to follow, honestly. But back to what I said about Menge earlier, this is also, tying into what I'm thinking about at my time here. I look to certain Menge potters to like ground my pottery and my work, and the generational lines down from them. I especially feel connected to this movement because of, the spread to North Carolina and the style, but also because its origins are so mixed from the very start. Not only in the East Asian roots, which are largely credited to be Japanese, but also take very strong Korean and Chinese inspirations, but also the very heavily present European roots in the way that this East Asian folk craft was filtered and translated by whiteness and privilege to come to America. And I noticed these degrees of separation in both Menge and myself, and I noticed the Western fetish for assimilated East Asian aesthetics in both pots and people. But I'm gonna think about all of that while I play with dogs and animation, and I'm really excited to keep working here at Clayworks. Okay. Thank you so much for coming to hear me talk today. All the installation photography for my solo shows at Micah is by Seth Fields. The photos of me working in the studio are from Kayla Morgan, and then the studio animation photography is by me. And there's my website if you want. So thank you.